Hey guys, it's Chris. Welcome to Panels in Progress, and this is a part of a bigger series where I am inking my comic. This is an ongoing series, so make sure you subscribe to follow the process. But today's video is I take you through page by page my thoughts and process while I ink this short story horror comic. Alright, so I really struggled to start the inking phase of this comic. I don't know what it was. Probably fear, probably imposter syndrome, probably. I don't know. But I procrastinated so much in starting the beginning of this comic. I think that I had a lot of expectations about how I wanted the comic to look in the inked version, and I had a lot of ideas about how I wanted to achieve that look, but I wasn't quite sure how I was going to pull it off. So starting even on just the first page was extremely overwhelming for me, and it probably took me 2 weeks working a couple hours every single night, every other night, just depending, to actually begin the process of inking the first page. But slowly but surely, I did start to pull it together. Started on the first panel with the background, started with just the foreground elements because that seemed to be the easiest thing, and maybe that's the first thing I started to use as a tool to propel me forward, which is start inking the easiest thing that I see on the panel, because the whole entire panel was intimidating. So I said, let me just start on the first thing on the panel. And I kind of built it up in layers. So I started with the foreground inks, then I went into the details, then I would go further and further into the background, and then the last thing I really did was focus on those heavy shadows, because this scene is supposed to be at night, so I wanted to make sure that there were heavy shadows throughout the landscape. And when it came to inking the figure, that was another thing that I struggled with, because the character, I wasn't sure. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what my inking style is. I don't know what's going to be my permanent style or the way I want things to go. So for this figure, I did kind of a cross between heavy inks and then some hatching as a tonal variation. And the more I started working on the comic, the more I realized that maybe this could be just black and white without the color. But then I'm kind of going back and forth, because ultimately I want to get better at coloring comics. So I still am going to color it at the end, but maybe I'll have two versions, a black and white version and a color version. But that is the first page. So already the second page, the second and third page of this comic has been a struggle, if I do say so myself, and it's actually been different from my other comics. Normally I start with the characters when inking, and I have no issue inking the characters, and then the backgrounds are kind of a last thought, last resort sort of situation. But for this one, I'm finding myself starting with the backgrounds and having a lot of fun building up the backgrounds and making them feel lived in. And the character, I'm kind of unsure what to do. I haven't really decided what I want my inking style to be. So this comic is really an experimentation of what might be my style one day in the future. Like right now, I'm really pleased with how it's coming together. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm still problem solving, and I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to interpret what I'm interpreting. And doing objects is easy, but when it comes to interpreting the skin of wrists, that's where I'm really struggling. And so I decided to do all the backgrounds first and save the skin or the character for last. And I went back to indicating form with ArtWad, which I watched the video and he was doing it on inanimate objects. But I believe there's a lot of things I can take from inanimate objects and use them towards indicating form with people that I just need to incorporate. So I need more practice with that, but what I'm creating so far, I'm pretty pleased with how it's coming together. Another thing that I'm finding is that because of how much detail I'm adding into the comic, how much more I'm doing, my old goal of trying to do 5 pages in 1 week, 5 inked pages in 1 week, is not going to cut it. It's way too much. 2 pages seems manageable depending on the size of the panels within the page. So I'm going to keep with that. I've got 3 pages, which I would say are nicely done. And then I'm going to do 2 more pages. I'm just going to take them 2 pages at a time until the entire comic is done. So I'm moving forward, I'm making progress, but it is definitely, I feel stronger in aspects that I used to question, and then in certain things, like I said, indicating form within the character and not relying on just heavy blacks when I need that transition where like manga would have screen tones. I'm trying to understand what's the best way to use lines to give that depth and dimension without doing too much. I had a practice comic a long time ago. It was just a 2-page comic where I did way too much line work, and I'm trying to just balance between the two. So hopefully by the time I finish this comic, I have some more concrete ideas of how I want to do that. So something I didn't account for was that having a newer inking style, it's going to take me longer than I used to. I used to have a minimum of like 5 pages I wanted to get done and inked in an entire week, but that was when my inking style was nothing more than an outline with maybe a few indications of light, varying a little bit of the line weight. It really wasn't anything complicated back in the day. But now, because I'm able to imply form and put much more detail into the artwork, 2 pages seems like it's too much. And I recently, like the page that I'm working on now, it took me all week and I'm still not finished working on it. And that's mostly because I didn't realize how much detail I was going to need to put into making the bug underneath the skin look like it's actually underneath the skin. And I had to do some side studies to figure out like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make this bug look like it's underneath the skin but still give the insinuation that it's a bug and it's creepy? So I studied from Manhole and how they handled a parasite underneath the skin, and then I went to Google and I started Googling what does it look like to have parasites underneath the skin, which I do not recommend, but for the sake of making my comic look as good as it could possibly look, I went ahead and went down that rabbit hole. And I did some studies in my sketchbook, and I think that I understood the basic effect, which is basically using a gradation to imply the higher bumps of the bug. That is the part that is coming further up from the skin, and then the recesses are in shadow, and then just kind of manipulating that through the foot. Another thing that I started to struggle with that I wasn't quite sure and I'm still working through is how do you ink skin without making it look like you're using way too many lines. I haven't figured that part out yet, so I kinda have been doing like some hatching, but I'm not sure if that's the method I want to do for the rest of my life. So I'm glad that this comic is just a experimentation on inking and the process in general, because there's still a lot of things that I'm figuring out, but the effect that I'm managing to get, I do like it. But the more I ink and the more detail I put into it, I'm also wondering to myself, am I doing too much considering this comic is going to be colored? And at this point, I'm only on page 3, so I'm not really sure. But ultimately, I know that I'm going to go back and go over, because there are some areas of opportunity to put in more detail, especially texture for the foot, and maybe that's where I can use like a screen tone or something to imply that detail, because feet, especially the bottom of feet, are not smooth. There's little crevices, but I just need to understand how deep into that detail do I want to go, and the answer is not really. I just want to make it look believable that it is a foot and that there's things going on. The other thing I know I'm going to have to go back on is adding dirt and grime. Riss has been running in the woods barefoot. His feet should have scrapes and scratches and dander and things on it, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to achieve that yet. So that part is left out until this point. But so far, the inking process is underway, and I do like the direction that it's going in. Alright, so I barely finished page 4, started working on page 5 of the comic, got most of the way done, but basically I'm getting into the nitty-gritty of the details, and I still am struggling to bring that bug to life. And when I did bring the bug to life to make sure that it looked like it was underneath the skin, I felt like the effect I was going for was good, but then I needed an effect around the foot. Still haven't figured out what to do with that. Still haven't figured out how to make the foot look dirty on the bottom, which maybe I can do with color, but I don't know. This page is just me working, and like, I like the effects that I'm doing for the background. I think the backgrounds look good. I think the characters look good. I feel like I'm also overthinking my inking process, because now I'm trying to do a lot more than I've ever done, and I don't know if it is working or not. I think it is, but I'm trying to remember, especially for the little details, that I'm zooming in a lot, but most people are not going to zoom into the background. Most people are not going to recognize these small details. So with that in mind, I just remember to zoom out. And when it comes to the panels that need to be very expressive, very detailed, I'm putting in extra work. So even though my goal for the week is completing 1 page of inks, sometimes it's taking about a week and a couple of days just to get those details in. And that's because I'm not spending several hours a day on the comic. If at best I'm spending 1 hour to 2 hours every single day to get a little bit more done than I did yesterday. So I'm breaking it down into pieces. Instead of focusing in on an entire page for a sitting, I am focusing on one panel, and maybe sometimes it's just the background that day, and then it's the character the next day. And I am still inking the background first because I'm finding a lot of confidence in the background, and I'm saving the character for last. And I'm adding in those spot blacks because in my last comic, no spot blacks whatsoever, even though there should have been plenty of them. So this time I'm really going in heavy to emphasize that this is a night scene with very little lighting, and it's like I'm getting closer to those last 2 pages, but I am not rushing this process. I am enjoying the process, even though I am equally excited to finish the inking process and get on to the color. So that is the update for page 5. Got 2 more pages to go. Alright, so this is my last and final page that I'm working on, and this page actually took the longest because work life really took over, and I did my best to make some sort of progress every single day. I try to follow the advice that I give you guys, which is to, even if you only have an hour, if you only have 20 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever the time, I try to continue to just keep going and keep inking. And on this page, I did not start with the first panel because that first panel to me was intimidating and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to pull it off. And maybe this is an example of sometimes you don't necessarily have the answers you need, but if you just start somewhere else, eventually the answers that you need will come to you. So I started with the last panel first, which is the hand, and I actually didn't even really know how I was going to ink that panel, but I'm actually pretty pleased with how that came out. Then I moved to the face because that was another easy win for me. I actually need to go back and do some detailing on the face because it's not quite where I want it to be now that I'm actually looking at it. But the A's stacked on top of each other, I got that idea from a comic I read. It was a web comic called The Last Halloween, The Children, and I really liked how I believe Abby Howard, handled the words in that comic. So I stole that idea, and then with that I just kind of picked and chose which panel I was going to do next because I was concerned about how to show what I wanted to show. I've never done anything to this level of detail before. I've never done this dynamic of a pose in a comic before, and I'm still making decisions and figuring it out, and this page is by no way done, so I'll have to roll what the final pages look like. But I decided to go with a hatching effect for the clothing textures, and then try to keep a simple hatching effect for the skin tones, and then a different type of hatching style for the bug itself, because I wanted to show that these things are not all made out of the same thing. And I think that's where I struggled the most, is that sometimes I think that I'll say that my past self didn't understand rendering, and I'm still learning, but my past self would render everything, no matter whether it was skin, metal, clothing, whatever. Everything had the same rendering style, which made everything look plastic or make everything look the same. And so with this page, I was actually able to experiment with different hatching techniques that I was learning from the pen and ink drawing book by Alfonso Dunn, and trying to put some of that into play without actually knowing what the hell I was doing. But I'm really pleased with my speed line effects. I'm really pleased with just how it all came together, and I can say that for inking especially, this is the best inking job I've ever done, and I'm so proud of myself for sticking with it. And even though this was only a 7-page comic, it took not nearly as long as a full one-shot, not nearly as long as my last comic, but it still was a test of my endurance, because I had an idea, I had to write it out, I had to finish it, and that was ultimately the plan, to finish it. So what's next for this comic? Obviously, coloring and flatting is the next step. However, once again, just like inking was not my strong suit, coloring is also not my strong suit. So I'm kind of putting a pause on the comic right now, and I'm going on a side quest. I know. Side quest. But I feel like the side quest is necessary. My wife actually gave me the idea because I was excited about how well I was doing making the comic itself, and she was like, well, if you're taking all the time to make the inking as best as it can be, why don't you take the time to just learn coloring the way you need to learn it and then come back to the comic. She reminded me that I am my own boss. I am setting my own deadlines. I'm the one who's coming up with this entire idea, so there's no need to actually rush into the coloring phase when I am unsure of my coloring abilities. So I am taking the ArtWad Intro to Painting course, and then I think I'm gonna go ahead and do the ArtWad Intro to Cell Shading course, because I think those two things will help me out dramatically. And after I take those courses, I think I'll be ready to color it and give it the best of my ability. So be on the lookout for an ArtWad Intro to Painting and Cell Shading review. But for now, this is where I'm at with the comic. If you join my Patreon, you'll be able to see these pages in their entirety up until this point. The Patreon is where I basically give a deep dive into my thought process and how I worked my way through these pages. And if you're interested in my actual thought process, give it a try. Links will be in the description below. How are you guys doing on your comics? Or where are you guys at in your process? Did you come along with me so far? If so, let me know how you guys are doing. Are you pleased with your inking or your penciling or wherever you're at? Just let me know in the comment section below. And until next time, let's make some progress.